If you grew up in the West, you've been subtly, consistently programmed. From the evening news to the films we watch, a very specific narrative has been spun around Islam. Out of 1,000 films tracked across 100 years, over 93% flatly reduced Muslim and Arab characters to violent caricatures, and only 1.2% in a positive light. That is blatant stereotyping. It is inarguably bigotry. The blueprint of dehumanization is old. A century ago, cartoons regularly framed them as primal killers with knives or backyard tyrants holding women in chains. Look, it's easy to dismiss the propaganda as old relics, but ask yourself, what happens when that century of conditioning meets real-world crisis? The old machinery simply goes into overdrive. Headlines blame the community for the current Iran war, while political cartoons reduce Palestinians to cockroaches to be stomped out by boots. When the culture spends 100 years normalizing the caricature, the step to policy is terrifyingly short. It creates a vacuum where a sitting U.S. congressman can openly declare Muslims don't belong in American society. That is the wall we are here to dismantle. Before we dive in, let's be clear. I am not a prophet, and I have no desire to convert you, certainly not to Islam. And I'm not here to romanticize anything. It is a flat fact that severe human rights abuses and oppression, especially towards women, exists today in the Middle East. But there is a massive difference between calling out a regime's behavior and spending a century training a people to see 1 billion humans as a faceless threat. I'm simply offering a different lens to view the world. When you strip away the architecture and the dogma, you find common connections between us all. Welcome to the Altarless Traveler, a space for the spiritually curious, the questioners, and the deconstructors. Which brings us back to that wall. How can we deconstruct our indoctrination of Islam in order to extract universal wisdom from the tradition we were programmed to fear? What can we learn from Islam? Before we dive in, let's break our first preconception using cold hard numbers. When most Westerners think of the Muslim world, they automatically picture the Middle East. But that's a geographic illusion. Look at what happens when we switch from the percentage of a country to the actual total population living there. The reality is that the vast majority of the world's 2 billion Muslims live in the Asia-Pacific region. This cartogram tells the real story. Watch what happens when we distort the global landmass based entirely on population. That stick figure on the left, that's North and South America, which has a relatively tiny share of Muslims, along with Europe and much of Asia. Muslims dominate one contiguous landmass, but are minorities everywhere else. They are primarily in a band that stretches from North Africa across the Middle East, India and its neighbors, through Indonesia. Indonesia alone is home to more Muslims than the entire heart of the Middle East combined. I've lived with all the major religions of the world in 8 different countries. I've traveled to over 50. When Michaela and I moved to Kuwait in the 90s, our Western conditioning didn't dissolve during a lecture. It happened over a cup of tea we literally weren't allowed to refuse. This is called Karam. It isn't just being polite. It is an intense spiritual duty. A guest is seen as a literal blessing brought into your home by God. Look, I'm from West Texas, and I understand hospitality, but this went beyond hospitality. It was an ambush of generosity. A local Kuwaiti family invited us to an outing on their boat in the Arabian Gulf, and we were excited. And we spent the better part of the day in the sun, some fishing, boating around, whatever, we just talking and having a good time. But then at the end of the day, they unexpectedly invited us to their home for dinner. We couldn't say no. We go to their house, we have dinner, then we have tea. It starts getting late. We tried to call it a night, but our host became visibly agitated. They became upset. Stay. No, what's wrong? No, have more tea. Here, have more coffee. Little Turkish coffees and sweet teas over and over again. And finally, we stayed about an hour to be polite, and we finally said, we just really need to go home. and we upset them. In our culture, leaving early is respectful to the hosts, but in their culture, it's an insult. It's saying that they somehow did not comfort us or did not provide us the comfort of coming into their home. My wife reminded me that she once complimented a student on her necklace, this necklace, and the student, of course, she took it off and she just gave it to her, and my wife still has it. Along with the generosity came a level of daily discipline. I was working for the Kuwait oil company. They had hundreds of Kuwaiti businesses. And I'll never forget the first time I walked into a corporate bathroom, and here is a Kuwaiti. His leg is lifted up and his foot is in the sink, and he's trying to wash his feet. He was practicing Wudu, the ritual washing of hands, face, and feet to prepare for prayer. Throughout the day, we'd hear the call to prayer, which in the Muslim world occurs 5 times a day. And when you're at work and you hear the call to prayer, the office just kind of shuts down. And all the Muslims retire to these large prayer rooms. Now, the Westerners, we stayed out of them. Inside these prayer rooms, they did have washing facilities. They did have rooms to lay their rugs down, to point towards Mecca, and to do their ritual prayer in unison. We watched from a distance, but it was fascinating and incredibly disciplined. You'd see it anywhere. You might be driving down a highway, and if it came time to call prayer, some cars would pull over, maybe a line of cars, get out, take the rug out of the trunk, face Mecca in the heat and the sun, and get down on their hands and knees and do their ritual prayer. It was a sight to see. It is the same way their ancestors prayed for centuries, but stepping off camels into the sand, into that same heat, to face Mecca and to pray. Now look, I'm not wearing rose-colored glasses, and I've lived on the literal fault lines where this deep devotion rubs against other worldviews. In Cyprus, the island is split between Greek Christians in the south and Turkish Muslims in the north, and they don't intermingle. In Bali, there's a tiny Hindu minority surrounded by an ocean of Muslims who control the government and are constantly trying to pass laws that affect the lifestyle of this small island. And in Israel, the Israelis and the Palestinians, it's bloody, and it continues to this day. The divisions are real, but the conflict doesn't happen because our spiritual needs are different. It happens because we mistake our religious conditioning for God's will. Conflict happens because we refuse to understand the deep roots of our neighbor's views. And understanding these differences isn't a theological compromise. It's the only true pathway to peace. So what did I learn? Catholicism taught me the human need to examine our brokenness and to seek a reset button. Islam showed me an example of a physical architecture of how to actually do it. That real spiritual peace requires a daily discipline to step away from our busy lives, to drop our egos, and to practice unconditional generosity to that stranger sitting across from us. Because when you strip away the Western propaganda machine, you don't find an enemy. You find 1 billion people trying to stay grounded in a chaotic world. Next time, we are shifting gears entirely. We're heading east to Thailand to explore a tradition that instead of asking you to worship a god or to worship a prophet, it asks you to sit still until your own illusion of self dissolves. We are diving into Buddhism. If you want to continue the journey, please like, subscribe, and comment, and tell us a time when someone was unexpectedly generous to you. And thank you.